The shuttle doors opened with a soft hiss, and Mira Vasquez stepped onto Orbital Station, Thessaly 9. For the first time in her life, she carried a single bag over her shoulder and wore the gray uniform of a first-year cadet at the Galactic Union Military Academy. Though the uniform hung slightly loose on her frame because it had been designed for species with different body shapes, the station stretched before her like a small city, floating in space, with curved corridors of white metal and windows that showed the endless stars beyond. And she took a deep breath of the recycled air that smelled faintly of chemicals she could not name. Around her moved dozens of alien cadets from species she had only seen in training videos back on Earth. Tall and thin Selvari walked past her with grace that seemed almost liquid, their bodies covered in skin that looked like living crystal, pale blue and violet and catching the light in strange ways. And their faces were angular and beautiful in a way that seemed almost too perfect. A group of Kreth stomped by on legs as thick as tree trunks, their forearms swinging as they moved, each one standing nearly 3 meters tall, with gray skin as rough as stone and small eyes that glowed a faint orange. She saw Nyalari drifting in pairs, their movements slow and careful, their large dark eyes seeming to look through her rather than at her. And she knew from her studies that they could read thoughts and emotions if they chose to do so. All of them looked at her as she walked. Some stared openly with expressions she could not read on faces so different from her own, while others glanced quickly and then looked away, whispering to their companions in languages that her translator implant turned into words she could understand. Is that the human? I heard they accepted one this year. Look at it, so small and soft. Class 7 Deathworld. Can you believe they let one in? Mira kept her face calm and her eyes forward as she walked toward the registration desk at the end of the arrival hall. Though she felt their stares on her back like physical weight, she had trained for this, had spent months learning about galactic cultures and customs and the way other species saw her kind. And she knew what they thought of humans. To them, Earth was a nightmare world, a planet of crushing gravity and violent storms and oceans filled with predators and continents covered in creatures that killed to survive. And the humans who had evolved, they were seen as something between primitive beasts and dangerous monsters. Galactic Union had only made contact with Earth 12 years ago, and in that time humans had earned a reputation that made other species nervous. Though most had never actually met one in person, Myra was the first human ever accepted to the Academy. She reached the registration desk where a Selvari administrator sat behind a curved console, her crystalline features showing an expression that might have been distaste or might have been fear. And Mira was not sure which was worse. Name and species, the administrator said in a voice like wind chimes. Mira Vasquez. Human. Earth. The Selvari typed something on her console without looking up. You have been assigned to Barracks Section 7. Room 1847. You will find your schedule and Academy rules in your quarters. Orientation begins tomorrow at the 6th hour. Thank you. Mira said. The administrator finally looked up, and her pale blue eyes met Mira's brown ones. You should know that many here do not believe your kind belongs at this academy, she said quietly. I would suggest you stay out of trouble, Deathworlder. Mira held her gaze for a moment, and then nodded once before walking away. She found her quarters after 20 minutes of navigating corridors that curved in ways her Earth-trained brain found slightly disorienting. And the room was small but clean, with a bed that was slightly too long and a desk with a console built into its surface. Set her bag on the bed and stood by the window, looking out at the stars and the distant blue curve of a gas giant that the station orbited for a moment. She let herself feel the weight of where she was and what she was trying to do back on Earth. She had been one of the best students in her military training program, top of her class in combat and strategy and physical endurance. But here she was nothing but a curiosity, a strange creature from a dangerous world that most species thought should never have developed intelligence at all. Her family had not wanted her to come. Her mother had cried, and her father had argued that humans did not need to prove anything to aliens who looked down on them. But Myra had made her choice because someone had to be first. Someone had to show the galaxy what humans could be. She turned from the window when her console chimed with an incoming message, and she walked over to read it. The message was from the Academy administration, and it contained her class schedule and a long list of rules and a map of the station. But at the bottom there was a note that made her stomach tighten. Due to your species classification as a Class 7, Deathworld origin, you are required to undergo additional monitoring and are restricted from certain training exercises until cleared by medical staff. Please report to the medical center at the 5th hour tomorrow for evaluation. She read the note twice and then closed the message. They were afraid of her. She realized, afraid of what she might do, even though she had never hurt anyone in her life. And that fear would follow her through every day at this academy. She sat on the edge of her bed and thought about the months ahead. There would be cadets who hated her simply for what she was, instructors who expected her to fail, and rules designed to limit her because the galaxy had decided that humans were too dangerous to trust. But she had not come this far to give up. Outside her window, the stars burned cold and bright in the endless dark, and somewhere among them was a small yellow sun and a blue and green world where her family waited to hear how she was doing. She would make them proud. She would show everyone what a human could do when given the chance. Tomorrow, the real challenge would begin. But tonight, she would rest and prepare herself for whatever came next. Mira Vasquez lay back on her bed and closed her eyes. And in the silence of her small room on a station full of aliens who feared her, she smiled. She was exactly where she was supposed to be. 3 weeks passed, and Mira learned what it meant to be alone in a galaxy full of creatures who wanted her gone. The academy was harder than she had expected, not because of the classes or the training, but because of the small cruelties that filled every day like poison dripping into water. It started with little things. Her equipment would go missing from her locker, and she would find it hours later stuffed into waste disposal units or floating in the stations, recycling pools. And when she reported it to the instructors, they would nod and write notes, and nothing would ever change. Her name disappeared from study group lists, and when she showed up to join them anyway, the other cadets would fall silent and stare until she left. Messages appeared on her console calling her name she had never heard before but understood from context. Words in alien languages that meant animal and beast and mistake. She ate alone in the dining hall at a table in the corner while hundreds of other cadets talked and laughed around her. And the food they served was bland and tasteless because it was designed for species with sensitive digestive systems that could not handle anything stronger. Myra thought about the spicy food her grandmother used to make back in New Mexico, dishes with peppers that would send most of these aliens into medical shock. And she smiled to herself because there were some things they would never understand about humans. The leader of her tormentors was a Selvari named Torvan, who came from one of the oldest noble families in the Union. He was tall even for his species, nearly 2 meters, with crystalline skin that shifted from deep blue to purple depending on the light. And he moved through the academy like he owned it, because in many ways his family did. The Selvari had been founding members of the Galactic Union thousands of years before humans had invented writing, and they had never forgotten their place at the top of the hierarchy. Torvan had made it clear from the first day that he considered Myra's presence at the academy to be a personal insult. Your kind crawled out of the mud only yesterday, he told her in the corridor after their first combat theory class, his voice carrying so that everyone nearby could hear. You should be grateful we allow you to walk among civilized species at all." Mira had said nothing and walked away. And Torvan had laughed with his friends, as if her silence proved his point. His pack was always with him. 3 other Selvari, who followed him everywhere and laughed at his jokes and sneered at his targets. 2 massive Kreth, whose 4 arms could crush metal, and whose loyalty to Torvan came from some debt their families owed his. And 2 Nihilari, whose telepathic abilities made them perfect scouts and spies for whatever cruelty the group planned next. 7 in total. 7 against 1, and they had never lost a target before. Mira learned this from whispered conversations she overheard in the corridors, and from the looks of pity she sometimes caught from cadets who were too afraid to help, but not cruel enough to join. Intervan's pack had driven out 4 cadets in the past 2 years, all of them from lesser species or lower social classes, all of them broken by the constant pressure until they requested transfers or simply disappeared. Myra was supposed to be next, but she did not break. She trained alone in the gym during hours when others slept, running and lifting and fighting practice drones in the simulation rooms. And she never complained about the gravity. That was set to 0, 7G standard, even though it felt like floating. Compared to Earth's crushing pull, she studied in her quarters with the door locked and learned everything the academy had to teach, even when instructors seemed surprised that she could understand the material. She kept her head down and her mouth shut and her eyes open, watching and waiting and learning the rhythms of this place that wanted her gone. And slowly, without meaning to, she began to make Torvan angry. He had expected her to cry and beg and break like the others, but instead, she simply endured. And her endurance was an insult he could not accept. "The human thinks she is strong," he said to his pack one evening in the common room, loud enough for Mira to hear from across the space. "She thinks she can outlast us because she comes from a world of monsters. But she does not understand that we are the ones in control here." Myra did not look up from her datapad. "Perhaps she needs a more direct lesson," one of the Kreth rumbled. "Perhaps she does," Torvan agreed. And his crystalline face twisted into a smile that held no warmth. Myra heard every word, and she understood what was coming. They were done with small cruelties and ready for something bigger. Something that would break her once and for all. And she knew that when they came for her, she would have to make a choice. Could submit and let them hurt her and hope that the instructors would finally step in. Or she could fight back and risk everything she had worked for. But there was a third option that none of them had considered. Myra Vasquez was not just a human. She was a human from Earth, a Class 7 Deathworld, a planet where everything that lived had spent 4 billion years learning to kill or be killed. Her ancestors had hunted mammoths and fought saber-toothed tigers and survived ice ages and plagues and disasters that would have ended most species. Her body was built for violence in ways these soft aliens could not imagine. With dense bones and fast muscles and a pain tolerance that came from evolving in a world where injuries were just part of daily life. She had spent her whole life learning to hold back, to be gentle, to move slowly so that she did not accidentally hurt the fragile creatures around her. But if Torvan wanted a fight, she would give him one, and he would learn why the galaxy called her world a death world. Mira finished her studying and went to bed. And she slept peacefully because she was not afraid of what was coming. She was ready for it. The attack came on a cold evening when the station's lights had dimmed to simulate night and most cadets had returned to their quarters. Myra had stayed late in the library studying for her tactical assessment exam, reading through scenarios and battle histories from wars that had been fought before her species had discovered fire. And she had lost track of time until the automated systems announced that the library would close in 10 minutes. She packed her datapad into her bag and made her way toward the exit, taking the route she always took through deck. 14, where the maintenance corridors connected the academic section to the residential blocks. It was a longer path, but a quieter one, and she preferred the solitude to the crowded main hallways where other cadets stared and whispered. The corridor on deck 14 was narrow and lined with pipes and conduits that carried power and water and air throughout the station. And the lighting was dim because this section was not meant for regular foot traffic. Myra was halfway through when she heard footsteps behind her. She did not turn around, but she slowed her pace and listened, counting the feet by the sounds they made on the metal floor. And her heart began to beat faster as the number grew. 2 sets of heavy footsteps that could only belong to Crethry. Sets of lighter footsteps with the clicking sound that Selvari. Crystalline feet made on hard surfaces. 2 more sets, so quiet they were almost silent. The careful movement of Nyellery, who did not want to be heard. 7 in total. Mira stopped walking and stood still in the center of the corridor. "You might as well come out," she said, without turning around. "I know you are there." Laughter echoed off the metal walls, and Torvald stepped out of the shadows ahead of her, his crystalline skin catching the dim light and turning it into scattered patterns on the walls around him. "The little Deathworlder thinks she is clever," he said, as his pack emerged from hiding spots on all sides, blocking both ends of the corridor and leaving her nowhere to run. 2 Creth were behind her, their massive forms filling the corridor like living walls, and their forearms hung ready at their sides. The 3 Selvari spread out beside Torvald, their movements graceful and coordinated like dancers in a performance they had rehearsed many times before. The 2 Nyellery hung back near the edges, their large dark eyes fixed on Myra with an intensity that told her they were already reaching toward her mind with their telepathic abilities. Myra set her bag down slowly and straightened up to face Torvald. "7 of you," she said, her voice calm and quiet in the narrow space. "You really thought you needed 7? Torvald's smile widened and showed teeth that were slightly too sharp for a species that was supposed to be herbivorous. "We thought it would be more fun this way," he said. "More people to watch you cry and beg. I have never begged for anything in my life. Then tonight will be a new experience for you." He stepped closer, and the others moved with him, tightening the circle around her like predators closing in on wounded prey. But Myra did not feel like prey. She felt something stirring inside her, something old and deep that her ancestors had felt on the plains of Africa when facing down lions. Something that whispered to her in a language older than words. It said, "You are not trapped here with them. They are trapped here with you. Last chance," Torvald said, his voice dropping to something that was meant to sound threatening. "Get on your knees and apologize for thinking you could ever belong here. Beg me to let you leave this station, and maybe I will let you walk away with only a few broken bones." Myra looked at him and then looked around at the others, and she felt a strange calm settle over her as she realized that she was no longer afraid. She had spent 3 weeks holding back, being careful, trying to fit into a place that did not want her, and she was tired of it. "No," she said simply. Torvald blinked as if he had not heard her correctly. "What did you say?" "I said no," Myra repeated, and she rolled her shoulders in a slow circle to loosen the muscles in her back and neck. "I am not going to apologize, and I am not going to beg. So if you want to do this, then let us do it." One of the Selvari laughed nervously. "Is she serious? She must be insane." Another one said. Torvald's expression shifted from amusement to anger as he realized that this small human female was not playing by the rules he expected. "Fine," he said coldly. "We gave you a chance. Remember that when you were in the medical bay trying to explain how you fell down so many times." He raised one hand and his pack tensed around her. "Ready to strike. One more thing," Myra said. "What?" She reached up and pulled a tie from her hair, letting it fall loose around her shoulders, and she shook her head once to settle it. On my world we have a saying, she said. Do not start a fight you cannot finish. Torvald snarled, and his hand swept down in the signal to attack. Kill her, he said, and then everything happened very fast. The first Selvari came at her from the right with a sweeping blow aimed at her head. A strike that had worked on every target before. Fast and powerful by the standards of species that had evolved ungentle. Whilst to Myra it looked like slow motion. Her body moved before her mind had time to think. Muscles firing with the explosive speed that 4 billion years of evolution had given her species. Fast twitch fibers that could accelerate her limbs faster than any Selvari could track. She ducked under the blow, and her fist shot up into the nerve cluster at the base of the Selvari's neck. Hitting with precise force in exactly the right spot, the Selvari's crystalline eyes went wide with shock and then rolled back as his body went limp. And he dropped to the floor before anyone else had even finished their first step toward her 0.8 seconds. The second and third Selvari froze for a fraction of a heartbeat, their brains unable to process what they had just seen. And that hesitation cost them everything. Mira spun toward them with her weight perfectly balanced. Her grandfather's boxing lessons flowing through her body like water. And she hit the second one in the solar plexus with a punch that drove all the air from his lungs. He doubled over gasping, and she brought her knee up into his face, feeling the crystalline structure crack under the impact. And he fell sideways into his companion. The third Selvari tried to grab her, but Myra was already moving, slipping past his reaching arms and driving her elbow into his throat with enough force to send him staggering back against the wall, where he slid down and did not get up. 3.2 seconds. The Kreth roared and charged from behind her, all 4 arms reaching out to grab and crush, their massive bodies moving with surprising speed for creatures so large. But they were used to fighting opponents who ran away or tried to block or dodge to the sides. Opponents who feared their size and strength. Myra did not run away. She ran toward them. The first Kreth swung all 4 arms inward in a crushing embrace that would have broken bones and ruptured organs in any normal species. But Myra dove forward and rolled between his legs, coming up behind him before he could turn her. Hands found the pressure points at the base of his spine that her xenobiology classes had taught her, the cluster of nerves that controlled motor function in Kreth physiology, and she drove her fingers in with all her strength. The Kreth screamed and his legs gave out beneath him as his nervous system temporarily shut down, and 800 pounds of gray flesh crashed to the floor like a falling tree. The second Kreth was smarter and more cautious, circling around to face her with his 4 arms raised defensively. But Myra could see the fear in his orange eyes now. He had never seen anything move the way she moved. She feinted left, and he swung to block. And then she was inside his guard and hitting him with a combination that would have impressed any boxing coach on Earth. Left jab to the throat, right cross to the nerve cluster under his primary arm, left hook to the kidney analog on his side, and a final uppercut that snapped his head back and sent him crashing into the pipes along the wall. 5.9 seconds. The Nyalari had been trying to reach her mind since the fight began, pushing against her thoughts with telepathic pressure that should have left her dizzy and confused and unable to fight. But human minds were not like other minds. 4 billion years of evolution had filled human brains with chaos and noise and layers of consciousness that most species could not understand. Dreams and fears and memories and instincts all swirling together in a storm of neural activity that was painful to touch. The Nyalari recoiled with cries of distress, clutching their heads as Myra's chaotic thoughts burned against their telepathic senses like touching a hot stove. And they stumbled backward, trying to get away from the psychic noise. Myra did not let them retreat. She crossed the distance in 2 quick steps and hit each one with precise strikes that dropped them to the floor. unconscious before they knew what had happened. 7.4 seconds. Torvald stood alone. He had not moved since the fight began. His crystalline face frozen in an expression of pure disbelief as he watched his entire pack fall around him like leaves in autumn. 7 trained cadets, some of the best fighters in their year, defeated in less than 8 seconds by a creature that was supposed to be a primitive beast from a nightmare world. What? He whispered, and his voice cracked on the word. What are you? Myra turned to face him, and she was not even breathing harder. Body was built for endurance that these aliens could not imagine. Evolved to chase prey across savannas for hours without rest. And this short burst of violence had barely raised her heart rate. I am human, she said simply. I am from Earth. Torvald backed away until his shoulders hit the wall behind him, and he had nowhere else to go. That is impossible, he said. No species can move like that. No species can do what you just did. My species can. She walked toward him slowly, stepping over the groaning bodies of his pack. And she saw him flinch with every step she took. My world tried to kill us every single day for 4 billion years, she said, her voice calm and quiet. Everything on Earth is dangerous. The animals and the plants and the weather and the water. And we survived all of it. She stopped an arm's length away from him and looked up into his terrified, crystalline eyes. We did not survive by being weak, she said. We did not survive by being slow. We survived by being the most dangerous things on a world full of dangerous things. Torvald's legs gave out, and he slid down the wall until he was sitting on the floor, looking up at her with eyes that had lost all their arrogance. Please, he whispered. Please do not hurt me. Myra looked at him for a long moment, and then she stepped back. I am not going to hurt you, she said. That is the difference between us. You wanted to break me because you thought I was weak. But I do not need to break you to prove I am strong. She picked up her bag from where she had dropped it and slung it over her shoulder. Tell your friends what happened here tonight, she said as she walked past him toward the exit. Tell everyone what happens when you try to jump a Deathworld Cadet. She did not look back as she walked away, leaving 7 groaning bodies and 1 terrified, noble behind her in the dim corridor. The whole fight had taken less than 10 seconds. The next morning, Myra woke to the sound of her console chiming with urgent messages. She sat up in bed and read through them one by one, learning that security had reviewed footage from a junction camera that had captured part of the fight, and that Torvald and his pack had been taken to the medical bay where they were still recovering from their injuries. There was a summons to the commandant's office at the 8th hour. Myra showered and dressed in her cleanest uniform and made her way through corridors that felt different than they had the day before. Other cadets still stared at her, but the stares had changed before they had looked at her with contempt and amusement, as if she were an animal that had wandered into a place it did not belong. But now they looked at her with something else: fear, respect, caution. She heard whispers as she passed, but the words had changed too. That is her, the one who fought Torvald's pack, 7 of them, and she did not even get scratched. Did you hear how fast it was? Less than 10 seconds. Deathworlder, I always knew they were dangerous. Myra kept her face calm and her pace steady as she walked to the administrative section of the station. The commandant's office was a large room with windows that looked out on the stars. And behind a curved desk sat a Selvari female, with skin the color of deep ocean water and eyes that held the weight of centuries. Commandant Wheeler was one of the oldest instructors at the academy, and her family had helped write the original charter that created the institution 400 years ago. Sit down, Cadet Vasquez, she said in a voice that carried no warmth but no hostility either. Myra sat in the chair across from her desk and waited. The commandant studied her for a long moment before speaking. Again, I have reviewed the security footage and the medical reports, she said. 7 cadets attacked you in a maintenance corridor on Deck 14 with intent to cause serious harm. And you defended yourself. Yes, Commandant. You defeated all 7 of them in approximately 8 seconds without suffering any injuries yourself. Yes, Commandant. Veeler leaned back in a chair and her crystalline features showed something. That might have been curiosity. I have been an instructor at this academy for 112 years, she said. I have trained cadets from 300 different species. And I have never seen anything like what I saw on that footage. Myra did not know how to respond, so she remained silent. Torvan and his companions have been disciplined for initiating an assault. Veeler continued. They will face a formal tribunal and likely suspension. Their families have already been notified, and I suspect there will be consequences beyond what this academy can impose. I did not want any of this, Myra said quietly. I just wanted to study and train and prove that humans belong here. I believe you, Veeler said, and her voice softened slightly. But you must understand that what happened last night has changed things. Word has already spread through the station, and it will spread further. By tomorrow, every fleet posting in this sector will know what a human cadet did to 7 attackers. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. The galaxy has been watching your species since first contact 12 years ago, she said. We knew you came from a dangerous world. We knew you were different from us in ways we did not fully understand. But I think most of us did not truly believe the stories about Deathworlders until now. She turned back to face Myra. You are cleared of any wrongdoing in this incident, she said. You may return to your classes and continue your training. But I want you to understand something, Cadet Vasquez. What is that, Commandant? You will never be just another cadet at this academy, Veeler said. From this moment forward, you are a symbol. Every human who comes after you will be measured against what you did. And every species in the Union will remember that when 7 trained cadets tried to attack a single human, she put them all on the floor in the time it takes to draw a breath. Myra stood and saluted in the human military fashion, her hand rising to her forehead. I understand, Commandant. Good. Dismissed. Myra left the office and made her way back toward the residential section. And as she walked, she noticed that other cadets moved out of her path without being asked in. The dining hall, she found a seat at her usual table in the corner. But this time, she was not alone for long. A young Kreth cadet approached her table with a tray of food and stood uncertainly until she looked up at him. May I sit with you? He asked in a voice that was deep, but hesitant. Myra gestured to the empty Myra gestured to the empty chair across from her, of course. He sat down, and they ate in silence for a few minutes. Before he spoke again, my cousin was one of the ones who attacked you, he said. He is still in the medical bay. Myra set down her utensil and met his eyes. I'm sorry, she said. I did not want to hurt anyone. I know, the Kreth said. That is why I am here. My cousin told me what happened. How you could have done much worse, but you held back. He said you did not even hit Torvan. He surrendered. Most would have hit him anyway, the Kreth said. He deserved it. Maybe, Myra admitted. But I did not come here to hurt people. I came here to learn. The Kreth nodded slowly and something changed in his orange eyes. My name is Gorath, he said. If you need a study partner or a sparring partner or just someone to sit with in the dining hall, I would be honored. Myra smiled for the first time since arriving at the station. I would like that, Gorath. Over the following weeks, more cadets joined her table. Slowly at first, and then in greater numbers. Species who had been afraid to associate with her before now seeking her out. The instructors began treating her differently too, adjusting her training scores to account for her Deathworld physiology, and challenging her with exercises that actually pushed her limits instead of the simplified versions they had given her before. And in the barracks at night, she heard conversations that told her the story was spreading exactly as Commandant Wheeler had predicted. Did you hear about the human cadet on Thessaly 9? 7 of them, and she was not even armed. My instructor says humans can run for hours without stopping and eat poisons that would kill us and survive injuries that should be fatal. Their planet is a Class 7 death world. Everything there is trying to kill them all the time. So how did they survive? They became more dangerous than anything else. On the night before her first anniversary at the academy, Mira stood by her window and looked out at the stars. And she thought about the message she would send to her family back on Earth. She had done what she came to do. She had shown the galaxy that humans belonged among the stars. Not as animals to be feared or primitives to be pitied, but as equals, who had earned their place through strength and endurance, and the refusal to give up more human cadets would come after her. And they would find a different reception than she had found, not because the galaxy had become kinder, but because it had learned to be careful in a barracks. Somewhere on the station, a young recruit asked a veteran about humans, and the veteran's forearms tightened at the memory. They are Deathworlders, he said. Class 7. Their planet tried to kill them every day for 4 billion years. He paused and his voice dropped lower. It failed. The recruit considered this for a moment. So we should be polite to them. Yes, the veteran said firmly. Very, very polite. Myra smiled at the stars and began to write her letter home. She had a lot to tell them.